everyone, and welcome to today's episode. We're going to be talking about My Merry Mistake by Courtney Walsh. So, this one is a contemporary romance, and as you can guess, it's a Christmas romance, and it fits within the clean and wholesome romance genre. And it's also book three in Courtney's Holidays with Heart romance series. And I actually haven't read the first two books. One of them is a Valentine's book, the other one is a New Year's Eve holiday book. This one's the first one, I believe, that's Christmas, but it is a standalone story, and you can easily read these books out of order without any problem. So, why did I want to read this one? Well, I've enjoyed reading Courtney's books, and I particularly enjoyed reading her Christmas books, including Merry Xmas and Across Country Christmas. So when I saw this one, I thought, yay, a Christmas story from Courtney Walsh. I really want to read that. So I also have an episode number 19 that I've recorded on one of Courtney's books, and that was for Everything's Coming Up Rosie that you can check as well. And the books I've mentioned, I've got recommendations on my blog, which you can find at my website at narelleatkins.com, and there'll be links in the show notes. So let's talk about the book. My Merry Mistake by Courtney Walsh is set in Chicago in Illinois. And we also have a small town not far from Chicago that's part of the setting as well, which is really fun. And so this one has quite a few romance tropes. So as you can guess by the cover, it's a sports romance, and we have an ice hockey hero in the story. This book's also part of a series where there's three sisters who are dating hockey players. So it very much fits into that hockey romance niche in contemporary romance. And it's an opposites attract story. We have Friends to More and Unrequited Love, which I do really appreciate as a combination together. I like how those tropes work together. So let's talk about the first line in the story, which is this one. Morticia Adams is staring at me. So, as you can guess, our heroine, our leading lady, she does have long dark hair. So she can pull off Morticia Adams for a fancy dress party for Halloween. And this is 2 years before the main story starts. So I'm going to put this on hold and introduce our leading lady and then come back to what's actually going on in the first chapter. So Raya is our heroine in the book, and she's approximately 32 years old at the start of the story in the present day. And she's a corporate executive who's effectively married to her job and is a workaholic. And she works in recruiting. So she's pretty much working all the time on call, irrespective of who her employer is. And she's the eldest with two younger sisters, and her two younger sisters are the leading ladies in the other two books in the series, and they're her best friends. And Raya is very much the older sister. She's overly responsible. She comes across as being a bit uptight and quite, not cold's probably the wrong word, but unapproachable is probably a better word. She's a control freak and a perfectionist, and she puts really high expectations on herself as well as on other people, and is quite critical of herself. And at the same time, she's very socially awkward and hates going to things like Halloween parties, which I'll get to in a sec. And as well as all these traits that you could think of as being negative traits, she's also a very caring person. She's very devoted to her family. She adores her sisters, would do anything for them. And part of the reason that she's so overly responsible relates to her family situation and her desire to help her mother and father out in terms of her siblings. So the family of origin situation definitely comes into play with this one. And she's also struggling with being single, and I'll get to that in a minute because I that's quite complicated. And this isn't a I'm desperate and not married by 30 story, but there's definitely story elements related to her being unhappy being single, which I will explain a bit later. It's kind of a twist on that trope, if that makes sense. So in chapter one, we're 2 years before the present day. Ray is dressed up as Morticia Adams in her Halloween costume, and she's about to head out with her sisters to a party in a penthouse in Chicago that's owned by a hockey player. And she really doesn't want to go to this party. She doesn't like parties. She's had bad experiences in the past in social situations like that, and she really doesn't want to go, but her sisters have convinced her to go. And she's uncomfortable in the costume, and it's all Yeah, it's all very awkward and very difficult. And now I'm going to introduce you to Finn. He's our hero in the story. So he's 29 years old. And of course, Raya doesn't want to date a hockey player. So guess what he is? He's a hockey player. And he's a really, really good hero. I really liked Finn. He grew up in Montana on a ranch. He's very fun and he's a complete opposite to Raya, who's serious and uptight and comes across as a bit judgy, even though that's probably not what she really is like deep down. Whereas he's the fun guy that everyone loves hanging around with, and he can walk up to anyone and start a conversation very easily. And they're a very interesting pairing as well. And like Raya, he also quietly helps people and has a heart to help others. And that's one of the things they have in common. And the one thing about Finn that's really important to know is that he has a serious dose of unrequited love for Raya, who has not given him the time of day. And there's a whole list of reasons behind that. So the meet cute in the early chapters happens at this party, and it's awkward, it's embarrassing, it's a case of mistaken identity for a couple of reasons, which I'm not going to go into because I don't want to spoil it. But it's also not the first time that these two have met. They actually met 5 years earlier when her sisters weren't around in a very different situation when Rhea was having one of the worst days of her life and a whole lot of stuff had gone wrong. And she made some silly decisions and Finn helped her. And she'd really rather forget that chapter of her life and forget that she ever met him, except for the fact that when Finn met her, he was completely intrigued by her. And yeah, she definitely hit his radar and stayed on his radar. So let's move back to the present day. And we're 7 years into the future because back then he was still in college, when they first met. Anyway, so they have all this history, and she doesn't want to date hockey players and can't see him as a potential romantic interest at all. And every time he sees her, he remembers why she caught his eye and why she would be perfect for him. So the unrequited love, I just loved how it played out in the story. It was set up really well. And as I said, there's so many problems, and I've started telling you about the problems of the unrequited love. And we have both characters that have emotional baggage they're dealing with from the past as well, and some wrong assumptions that they need to overcome. And both of them have some wrong assumptions about each other for different reasons, and they're valid reasons as well. And I can't say anymore because I'm not giving away spoilers. But Raya is stubborn and she's quite rigid in her thinking. And when she makes up her mind about something, it's really hard to change her mind. She likes her routine. She clutches onto work as what keeps her anchored. And she's really quite a hard nut for Finn to crack in the story as well. And being a workaholic and a perfectionist and a control freak is an absolute disaster for a whole bunch of reasons. And we actually see how that plays out in the story as well, because there are consequences from her workaholic behavior that we learn about as the story progresses. And so Finn's really challenged by how can he get Raya's attention? How can he even become friends with her? Because initially she's hostile to even that. And then if he can become friends with her, how can he look at whether they potentially could move into the more than friend zone? And that's the way the lovely romance in the story plays out. And there's also some other obstacles in the story that come along that really challenge some of their beliefs. And both of them have some character growth that they'll go through in the story to end up having their happily ever after together. So I really enjoyed the story. There's so much to love about it. The romance was really cute, and there were some rom-com story elements that border on the ridiculous that I really found fun to read. And we have the Hallmark vibes, which are always fun with Christmas stories. And with Finn, I just loved how he could see who Rhea was. And he did have the advantage of meeting her 7 years earlier and actually seeing past all the masks and all the pretense and everything, all her barriers that she normally puts up. So he knew who she was. And I loved how he was so patient with her as well and so loyal. He was a really good hero, the type of hero who definitely was worthy of her. And Raya, she could be frustrating at times. And I think some of this relates to I'm not really a big fan of the I'm desperately single and need to get married trope. Although it doesn't play out that way in the story. It's actually quite funny. Ray is illogical, and illogical is the only word to describe it, and quite illogical and ridiculous in what she thinks will fix that problem. And of course, it doesn't fix that problem and makes it worse. And of course, as the reader, you can see where this is going and it's not going to work. So I did appreciate the humor that went along with that. And I was very happy that she worked it out and she got over herself and was able to realize that Finn was a great guy who would be worthy of her. And she really needs to gain some perspective on who she wants to be with rather than having an idealized idea of this perfect guy that just doesn't reflect the reality of who that person is and also doesn't work for her. So her lack of understanding of herself and her lack of insight was one of her issues that she needed to overcome in the story. And as I said, she eventually got it together. And I did appreciate it being a sports romance, and I appreciated that there wasn't too much hockey in the book. I'm not a really big ice hockey fan, to be honest. I don't mind a little bit of hockey in the story, but a lot of hockey, and I'm going to be eyes glazing over and skimming. So I appreciated the little bit of hockey in the story. It was just the right amount for me, and I really enjoyed it. And I just love the ending. These characters have really got themselves in a bit of a pickle, trying to sort out a whole lot of stuff, particularly Raya with her mental gymnastics and trying to work out what's what. It was quite a process that she went through to unpack a whole lot of stuff. And I just love the ending and how it all came together at the end. It was very satisfying, and I was very happy with a big smile on my face when I closed the book, which is what you want when you've got a contemporary romance. It's a Christmas story. You want to get that lovely, feel good, happily ever after ending. So, my favorite book quote in the story is this one. Maybe you can't cure loneliness without actual connection. Now, this is Raya who's thinking this because in a million years, Finn would never think this at all. Like, he would see that for being ridiculous. And so, this gives you a bit of an insight as to where Raya's head is and the journey that she needs to walk to actually work out that Finn, who's right in front of her, is actually a good option for her. And it also ties into the story themes because the story has trust issues that need to be overcome, in particular with Raya. And we also have forgiveness themes that are addressed in the story as well. And that was done in a very sensitive way because there was some quite hard stuff that had happened in the past that needed to be looked at. And I appreciated how Courtney was very sensitive and how those issues were handled as well. So, in terms of the impact on me, there were lots of smiles, and Raya, with her flawed logic and ridiculous decisions, she really did make me laugh at times and giggle. It was quite amusing to watch this poor girl who was just so clueless in so many ways finally get it together. And I appreciated Finn's patience and loyalty in terms of waiting for Raya to work it out because it was a bit of a journey they were on. So, in summary, I recommend My Merry Mistake to readers who like Christmas romance, and particularly if you like those rom-commy Hallmark vibes that go with the Christmas romances. And if you like sports romances with hockey player heroes, I recommend this one. And if you like Friends to More plus Unrequited Love and Opposites Attract, and if you like the stories to have trust issues and forgiveness themes, and siblings with close families, and if you like clean and wholesome, low spice romance, then you'll enjoy this one as well. Thanks for joining me today. Does My Merry Mistake sound like a book that you'd like to read? Have you read it? Or have you read other books in the series? What did you think? You can let me know. If you're listening on the podcast, you can send me a text via a link in the show notes. If you're watching at YouTube, you can like the episode at YouTube or leave a comment at YouTube. And you can also email me at my website where I have a contact form, and you can find that at narelleatkins.com. And also, if you've enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, and you can do that at your favorite podcasting app or subscribe at YouTube, and then you'll get a notification of when my next episode drops. And also, if you've enjoyed this episode, please share the link with a friend, especially a friend who enjoys reading contemporary romances with Christmas themes, and also a reader who you think would enjoy Courtney Walsh's books. Thanks for tuning in, and see you next time.